And, okay, and I am also the new director of the Iowa Center for School Mental Health. So as you may imagine, social and emotional learning, how to teach social and emotional learning, but also what do teachers need to know about students' social and emotional learning and their own social and emotional learning. Those are all things that we're going to cover in our discussion today. Ashley, could I have you advance to the next slide? Okay, so just a little icebreaker here. You know, you can use the chat to talk to me a little bit about what you'd like to know about SEL. So what do you think it is? What is SEL? Why is it important? How do you think it pertains to your job as a teacher? Who can help you implement it? And then what are the student outcomes that you would expect to see? So just a few minutes here to get you working and thinking of the chat. Remember, this is not a test. I'm just interested to kind of warm you up a little bit and hear, you know, what you think it is and how it works and what it's supposed to do.
And putting things in the chat, she said, I can go ahead and read those out loud when those come through. So, oh yeah, so it looks like Amy shared helping students develop coping strategies. Thanks for adding that. I don't know if you're seeing the chat, Dr. Bardoshi, but Sarah said, learning the skills necessary to be successful socially and emotionally. So with emotional regulation and socializing with peers. Autumn just added, I imagine SEL pertaining to my job as a teacher as giving me tools and knowledge about how to address student emotions and be able to help them so they can learn comfortably.
Okay, anybody else? Okay. Yes, emotional regulation, socializing with others, socializing with peers, dealing with stress, right? Somebody said coping strategies, understanding social cues, right? Those are all really important, important skills. Let me see here by show of hands. Do you know how to do the little hand? To raise the hand? Let me see by show of hands. How many of you are interested in elementary education? Okay, quite a few here. Okay, and let me see, how about who is interested in working with middle schoolers? Okay, two, okay, and how about high school students? High school? Zach, are you high school? Okay. Marissa, okay. So it looks like the majority of you are interested in working with students that are elementary. We have a few high school and few middle school. And the reason why that's important is, as you can imagine, it looks really different, right? Emotional regulation looks different. Social cues look different if you are a kindergartner versus an 8th grader versus a junior in high school. So, Ashley, if we can go to the next slide. I'm going to have her play this brief video just to get us thinking about SEL.
Okay, I'll have to stop share and share again so that the sound works. Let me make sure I do that. Okay. Oh, wait. Bear with me, screen. Okay. And then, oh, it's not making it larger. Is that okay if it's?
Yeah, that's fine. No worries.
Okay.
Social emotional learning is essential. It's the tools that kids need to be resilient, to be problem solvers, to be good people.
SEL is really about the holistic development of young people.
SEL is trying to bring a balance to the individual and what are the personal competencies you need to develop to be successful. How do you pull them all together so that kids can relate and navigate the world more effectively?
The myth was that knowledge was information that could be bolted onto a brain like any other kind of mechanical part. The truth is, knowledge is constructive. The truth is, all learning is relational. The truth is that emotion drives attention, and attention drives learning.
Social and emotional learning is about how you do school. It's about what the student experiences, what the student learns, how teachers teach.
We can think about schools and classrooms, out-of-school time spaces, families, etc., as places where there's an exchange of knowledge about the world, knowledge about yourself, and knowledge about the other persons that you're interacting with. All of those kinds of experiences, I think, help form and expose and shape the ways in which young people understand themselves and other people.
And we start talking about the whole child. Does your child understand self-awareness? Do they understand social awareness? Do they make good decisions? Are they responsible? And then we start talking about what that applies to academics and looking at all the essential skills we need them to be successful in life.
Children learn when their heart is open, engaged, connected, and filled with purpose.
Learning is magical, and through SEL, we can create conditions that allow all kids to access that magic.
So I show this video for a couple of reasons. First, it does a really good job of conceptualizing SEL, but it's also a video that CASEL has put out. How many of you have heard of CASEL? So it's the Collective for Social and Emotional Learning, and it's a wonderful resource for everything SEL, including lesson plans, videos, activities. So if you are a teacher, you're going to want to get familiar with CASEL because it does a wonderful job of really boiling it down to the essentials. But when we're thinking about social and emotional learning, Autumn, do you have a question, or is your hand just raised from earlier? Okay, figured no question, right? Did you have a question, Autumn? No, okay. So what it actually is we need skills to be able to learn and manage our emotions. So you guys talked about that. So that is one of the definitions of SEL. Also, skills to set and achieve positive goals. We need to be able to feel and show empathy for others, and not just emotional empathy, but also cognitive empathy, right? Like, what is Riley thinking? What would she be thinking in this moment? What makes sense? What is she experiencing? Establishing and maintaining positive relationships. So not just how to make friends, but how do you work together on a group project in class? And how do you maintain a positive relationship with your teacher? And then, of course, making responsible decisions, whatever that might mean developmentally. So we'll go to the next slide, and I'll tell you a little bit about, why do we need to really work on SEL? And, even as adults, we need to work on SEL. We know that our emotions and the relationships that we have really affect not only just how we learn, but whether we're able to retain that knowledge and how we use that knowledge in school, in work, in family, community. And then we know that the more positive emotions we have, the more able we are to sustain engagement and excitement about learning. We know that if we are dealing with a lot of stressful situations and we're not managing stress, that actually interferes with whether we're able to pay attention to something and whether we're able to remember it, right? How many of you have heard of people that maybe have gone through a traumatic event and they actually cannot remember the traumatic event itself because the stress levels are so high that the brain did not functionally encode that information. And our brain needs to encode information in order to learn, right? So that's why it's so important to manage stress. And then the other one is, we know learning is such a social process. You guys are too young, but when TV first came around, there's all this excitement about, oh, wow, we can put a bunch of educational information on the screen and put kids in front of a TV, and they're going to learn stuff. Little kids are going to be able to learn a lot more. And what we found is that that actually doesn't work. And the reason why that doesn't work is because kids need the social interaction back and forth with an adult. They're active learners. They cannot learn passively. So that's why learning is such a crucial interactive process. And teachers, peers, family, those are all components for how kids encode and use that information to learn. Okay, Ashley, next slide. So when I first started doing SEL, this is about 10 years ago, it was just kind of like trendy. It was just coming on as a topic that people were talking about, educators were talking about. And now we know it's not a trend. It's here to stay, right? Our understanding that, hey, as a kid, you come in with emotions. We need to be able to work with those emotions. Those are important for learning. That's here to stay. So in all 50 states now, we have preschool SEL competence standards. This is expanding to the other levels, elementary standards, K through 12 SEL standards, and then almost more than half of the states have SEL related web pages and guidance. So SEL collectively is being delivered to about 58,000 schools and to 30 million students. So we know this is something that's accessing many of them. So what do you think? Do you think Iowa has SEL standards? Iowa does have SEL standards. So when you are going active into the schools, you're also going to become familiar with those. And they're working really hard to actually making sure that some of those are reflected in instruction as well. Okay, Ashley, next stage. So I'm going to talk about the 5 core components of SEL. And there's 5 of them. So all of the things we're going to be doing deal with those 5 concepts. The first concept is managing emotions. So not just being able to identify what is the emotion that I'm feeling, but handling it both constructively and dealing with negative and challenging emotions, right? It's not, we're not supposed to feel negative emotions, but when they arise, what do you do with it? Learning to process those emotions and not just the emotions that are happening in the classroom, in the school, but also what's happening outside of school. And as you can imagine, kids come into the classroom from home, right? So whatever has happened that morning in the house, whatever situations are going on in their family, whatever is happening larger the community, kids are inputting all of that information. And that information can be translated as emotion. So you might have a student that's coming to the classroom with a number of emotions, even before you haven't managed to say good morning to them, right? So that's why this emotional management is so important. Let's go to the next stage. Okay, setting and achieving positive goals. You can imagine that that's a crucial competency, not just for kids, but for everyone, right? So not just making decisions, but solving problems as they come, being able to define what decisions you're making, why you're making them, what is an alternative solution, and then, this is kind of crucial, anticipating what the consequences of your decisions might be, right? We talk about setting realistic expectations and realistic discipline for kids, and this is why that is. We need to be able for kids to have an understanding of what are the consequences of each of the decisions that they make. The other skill is feeling and showing empathy, and it's in the next slide. So this kind of is a crucial skill, and not just being able to understand what are other thoughts and feelings and perspectives that people may be having, but also being able to differentiate when those are different from their own, right? It's very common for little kids to think, oh, I like pink. Do you like pink? Right? That's like, oh, I like something, so you also must like something. But as kids develop and mature, we want them to be able to differentiate. Okay, that's an opinion that you have. That's different from my opinion. And then the next slide is establishing and maintaining positive relationships. So how do you take all of that stuff, the emotions that are going on, people's thoughts and feelings, things that are happening for you personally, and how do you manage to use that information to maintain positive relationships with others? And when we're looking at relationships, we're not just looking at a relationship with a teacher and other students, right? We're also looking with family, work relationships. So some of those classic skills are cooperating, communicating respectfully, and then resolving conflicts with others. Okay, Ashley, this is a video that I want you to watch. It's on restorative circles. How many of you have heard of that term? And maybe. So it's actually a discipline focus that's actually using SEL. So teaching students about decision making, but really grounding that work in SEL. And it's just another example of how having some of this basic understanding of what social and emotional learning is can help you to really come through to kids. So I'll have Ashley play this video really quickly.
First, I'm going to read a quote. To succeed, you must first improve. To improve, you must first practice. Young people have to be given space to grow and to feel like, okay, I made a mistake, but from this learning experience, I can continue to become better. To learn, you must first fail.
When you're talking about student discipline, a lot of times we are punitive because it's faster and restorative takes more time. But restorative practices are better long-term. So at Procone, we have a place called The Zone, which we use in lieu of suspension.
Welcome to The Zone.
It's a collaborative space where kids get into a circle and they discuss what their behaviors were and ways to correct it.
We have The Zone every morning from 7 to 9 a.m. Today, we had 8 students in The Zone. We're here today to talk about how to make things right when we make mistakes, poor choices. Usually the infractions are cell phone use, disrespect, cursing, but it could also be that there was an argument in a classroom or more aggressive behaviors that also get sent to us. So even though you had a conflict that brought you here, if we can bring our best selves to this circle, we can get a lot done, we can learn from each other. When students come in, we go over circle guidelines so that there are agreements that we hold within this space. What does it mean to listen from the heart?
You're trying to feel like you're relating to the situation.
Just like showing respect to them.
Once we teach them really what the zone is and how this is not a space where there's a power dynamic between you and another person, then they kind of disarm and we get to what's causing that behavior.
I had somebody come to me and tell me that a friend said something bad about me. Most of the time when you're in trouble, you get a referral and you have a consequence. They don't really want to hear your side of the story.
Well, what happened?
When you come into Zone, they have a conversation with you and they kind of tell you how to solve your problem the positive way. I was able to go to her and work it out.
We're really just trying to get context. Whenever there's a conflict, right, both parties contribute to the conflict, right? Although you may not feel like you contributed to the problem, you played a piece in it. And that's a part of the social emotional learning that we're trying to get them to see. We really want to have a discussion about the things you can control.
I just need to catch myself and know my surroundings.
It is a place for students to process their role in it, understanding who was harmed, but then also understanding that it's okay to reflect on what you as a student needed in that situation.
I don't need anything from others to make it right because I can be mature on my own.
But how can we help you in the maturing process? Because we're going to be here too. What I usually say is I don't want to change your behavior. I want you to think about it before you do it. Really, I've seen them becoming very intentional about what they do, what they say.
Everybody has to own up to their consequences.
And that's the whole purpose of the zone.
By me owning it, it's gonna help me better.
Okay, so hopefully that gave you a little bit of context about how you can use SEL to help students navigate school. And it kind of leads me to the next slide, which is making responsible decisions. So not only avoiding risky behaviors, but really operating in a way that is really promoting your own health, your own best interests, and also looking at the interests of others and the interests of the classroom and the school and the family. So kind of we talked about a little bit, building tomorrow's citizens, and there's a component here that's important for citizenship, right? Learning how to promote your own best decisions, but also by taking into context the community that you're in the classroom. So that was kind of a quick overview. I want you to look at this visual because it really captures SEL. So we have here self-awareness, right? Self-management. Those are skills that pertain to ourselves. So these are the 5 SEL skills. So self-awareness, am I aware of what's happening right now with my emotions? Can I manage those emotions? Okay, so that kind of pertains to the self. Then we have some social component skills. So social awareness, am I understanding what's happening with other people in my classroom, my teachers, or in the larger community? And then relationship skills, am I able to connect with others? And then one that cuts across all 3 is responsible decision making. So how do I use the information about myself and the information about the context and then make responsible decisions, right? So those are the 5 core components of social and emotional learning. So if you don't learn anything else today, what I want you to remember is social and emotional learning is about self-awareness, self-management, social awareness, relationship skills, and responsible decision making. So those are the core. But how do we do that? So will these slides be available? Yes, Ashley can put the slides available to you. And Ashley, if you can go to the previous slide. Okay, so how do we go about and do this, right? So here you have in the classroom. This can be done through SEL curriculum and instruction. So for those of you that are going to be in an elementary setting, you might actually be having lesson plans that you give to kids about social and emotional learning. Or the school counselor might be coming in once every week, right, to give some specific lessons through instruction. Okay, but in the school, those of you that are in the middle school level, there are school-wide practices and policies, right? And that's where SEL hits there is, what happens when, let's say, a student is misusing their phone? How do you work together in a group? What is appropriate behavior to work in a group project? How do you deal with a crisis? Who can you ask for help? And then in the home and communities, then that's when we know we really need to work with the family, right? So family and community partnerships are really important. So in your role, as you look at this visual, where do you think your role is going to come through the most? Are you coming into the classroom, through the school, or through the home and community? You can use the chat to quickly put that in. As you think about interacting with your future students, where do you think most of that SEL is going to be happening for you? Classroom. Yeah, that's right? And it's so much easier when you're in elementary, right? Because you have the entire classroom. That's your classroom. And in middle and high school, you have a classroom around a specific topic. But regardless of the level, your first entry point is going to come at the classroom level. So that's why I want to talk specifically about some classroom skills as well. So Ashley, if you can go to the next slide. Okay, so again, these are the 5 competencies. Remember, 2 that have to do with self-awareness, self-management, 2 that have to do with others, social awareness and relationships, and then responsible decision-making. So let's go to the next slide, Ashley. Okay, so I'm going to talk a little bit, maybe would it help if I define what self-awareness is, what social awareness is, so you kind of know what are some of those basic SEL skills, and then I think after that, we can go into some case studies if that helps. Okay, all right. So what is self-awareness? So being able to accurately recognize your own emotions, your thoughts and values, and how they influence your behavior. And that sounds like kind of easy to do. Oh, I can recognize my own emotion. But, you know, kids sometimes need assistance. Adults need assistance. Are you angry or are you sad? Are you confused or are you overwhelmed? Are you disinterested or are you embarrassed, right? So trying to recognize what the emotions are, what are my thoughts are coming in. So we talk about an accurate self-concept because students need to know not just their strengths, but also their limitations, right? And it's so cute when you work with little ones, they'll say, you know, what are some of your strengths? I am the best dancer ever, right? And that's appropriate because they're little. But, you know, we want them to have an accurate self-concept. So by the time they hit middle and high school, they need to have a pretty good understanding of what is it that are their strengths and what are their limitations. We also want them to have a growth mindset. Have you heard of that term before? Growth mindset. So if they have, can you go back to that, Ashley? Oh, yes, growth mindset. Awesome. So if they have some limitations, we don't want them to just be down about it, right? And just be like, well, I can never learn math. Math is my limitation. We want them to be able to challenge some of those limitations into potential opportunities for learning. And then we also want students to reflect on their own processes of progress as a learner. And that's really hard to do, right? What is your role in the classroom? What are your responsibilities in the classroom? How does that come into, you know, how you present in our school? And that is part of self-awareness, right? Okay, so let's go. Any questions about self-awareness? Don't you think knowing your strengths and limitations, regardless of what age you are, is something really difficult sometimes to do, right? And understanding sort of your emotions and, you know, what triggers a particular thought or particular response. And that's going to be important for you too as teachers, right? You might have a student that just pushes your buttons, right? So having self-awareness about what are some of the emotions you're experiencing, or maybe you're tired from the night before, or, you know, what your responsibilities, roles are in the classroom is going to be important for you as well. Okay, let's go to self-management. Okay. So we all, you know, we all come through our daily lives with thoughts, emotions, memories, stressors, impulses. So the idea around self-management is how do you hold all of that and still show up for where you're supposed to show up. So for students, is they have to show up as learners. So they need to be able to manage those emotions and express them and manage stress in constructive ways. They also need to be able to push themselves, right? Have self-motivation and organizational skills so they can stay engaged in the activities they're learning about. And part of self-management too is kind of self-monitoring, figuring out, okay, what do I need to do? What is my goal? Was I able to achieve that goal? What are some things that I need to do to be able to better meet my academic or my personal social goals? I feel like as adults, we also need assistance with self-management, right? As you can imagine, self-management becomes harder the more stressed we are, right? You might be an excellent self-manager, and then several things are happening at the same time, and that's when sort of it might be more difficult. And with COVID and everything that's happening, that's why we're seeing a lot of our students struggling, is because that added level of stress really impacts how they're able to self-manage. Okay. Let's go to the next slide. And I love this one. This is all about social awareness. So do you understand where other people are coming from, what their perspectives are? And then are you able to empathize for them, even if they may not look like you or have a similar background to yours, right? So that's social awareness. So identifying strengths and challenges, respecting what is similar and what is different from others, and then being able to take perspectives, like, being in somebody else's shoes, being able to understand what they're experiencing. And then appreciating diversity is another component of social awareness. So what are maybe some prejudices and biases against people that you might have as a student that are different than you? And how do you approach those? And then engaging actively with others and having respect for others. Okay, the other one is relationship skills. And this is about being able, we know, but when we talk about relationship skills, we know what are the skill sets sometimes. It's like, communication and being engaging socially and building relationships and doing teamwork. But it's the ability to employ all of those things in order to, cooperate well with others, resist inappropriate social pressure. That's part of relationship skills. Being able to negotiate conflict when it arises, and then seeking and offering help when needed. And this is big for kids. How do you ask for help? Who do you ask for help? Or how do you know somebody else is asking for help? That's part of relationship skills as well. And then the last one that I'm going to offer a definition is responsible decision making. So, are you identifying potential issues? Are you able to analyze situations? Do you have alternative ideas and solutions about how to approach those? Are you able to reflect and ask yourself what if questions? And then, are you able to demonstrate what is not just good for you, but also for the good of the larger group? So those are all behaviors that kind of get at those responsible decision making. And when we talk even to kindergartners about being responsible, and it's hard to figure out what that is. Well, who do I have a responsibility to? Well, you have a responsibility to yourself, but also your peers, your teacher, your school, your family, and your community. So we're talking about social norms, ethical standards, safety. It's a complex concept sometimes to help our students understand. So I think for the sake of time here, because I also want to be able to do some hands-on things. Let's go to what can I do as a teacher? Yep, you were right. You were right, Ashley. So how can you use some of this information that you're learning about, and how can you be an active agent for SEL? One of the first things that you are going to be charged with doing when you are a teacher is integrating some of the social and emotional learning components into your curriculum. And, do you have group-based projects? Do you have norms for how students should approach those? Are you pausing and asking students to consider different perspectives when you are teaching something, right? So those are SEL skills. Another one is you can participate in a school team or a committee that selects SEL programs. And we know that, really the majority of the school administrators out there really believe that SEL is an important thing, but we know that sometimes they might not have the time or the access to some of those materials. I think Iowa City School District is doing an outstanding job with this, but some of the rural schools, the smaller schools, might need somebody to start a committee or to be an advocate for SEL, and that might potentially be you. And then the other component that we know works is communicating regularly with students and families about SEL, how you're using SEL in the classroom. Service learning opportunities or partnership with community organizations, those are all potential ideas. Okay, one quick slide. As if you need more evidence that SEL works. You are here taking this workshop, so you are not the right audience for convincing, but we know it increases academic achievement. One of the biggest barriers in schools that have limited resources is principals may say, well, this is great, but I have to teach all these things, and I have to make sure that my students are meeting the standards that are academic. But we know SEL actually increases academic achievement, and it improves behaviors. It makes it easier for teachers and students to be in the same space and be positive and focus on learning. And it really provides a strong return on investment. So for every dollar that is invested in SEL, there's an economic return of $11. And I'm not going to bore you with all the research components, but we know that SEL actually works long-term. So students with strong SEL skills are able to find better positions, better jobs as adults, and have fewer mental health concerns. So we know it impacts mental health as well. All right, let's go into our case studies. I'm rushing through this, Ashley, because I know we have a limited amount of time and lots of things to do. So this is where I'm going to provide you with a case study. And then I want you to maybe reflect a little bit about this and what this looks like. So here's a case study at elementary school. At Regina, music education teacher Mrs. Giller starts her brief yoga session by having students sit on the floor and pick a mantra or a symbolic gesture to make and think about for a moment. A peace sign, Giller advised her class Wednesday, is good to make when you feel wiggly, jiggly, and too talkative. A downward motion when you have a bad thought you want to clear out of your brain. An eagle gesture when you have lots of positive things you want to share with the world. Okay, guys, I want you to remember that choosing a mantra is really powerful, she said to the students. You are taking care of your mind and your body. She also has her students wobble through beginner poses, tree pose, airplane pose, warrior pose, but the exercise is less about the art of yoga than it is about creating time for students to reflect on their day and set a tone for the class. It's not so much a yoga segment as much as it is mindfulness practices we'll be using throughout the year, Giller said. Okay, so as you think about this potential example, what are some connections to SEL that you're able to make? How does this example relate to SEL? And you can use the chat, or you can also share verbally. Absolutely. It has a lot to do with self-awareness, right? Helping students identify emotions, naming those emotions, and having them see if there's negative thoughts or positive thoughts, how they can express them. Do you think it has to do with self-management too? Can you see a connection to self-management there? Potentially, right? Like, what do you do when you have a negative thought? Well, you can do a downward kind of gesture, right? So that's another component of self-management. Do you think doing this kind of activity helps also with social awareness? How might it help with them being more socially aware when as a classroom they're going through these poses and they pick a mantra? Yeah. So they're understanding that, hey, maybe not everybody's feeling like me. They may be feeling different things, and I'm going to pay attention and see what my fellow students are feeling. So there's many different ways to do something like this in the beginning of a classroom. Do you have any ideas or things you have heard that you think, oh, I kind of like it. It kind of matches this whole SEL kind of approach. And we're thinking about things of starting a day at an elementary school. Any activities that you have come across? Morning meetings. Who said that, Juliana? That is a great example. Juliana, would you like saying a little bit more?
Sure. So in the classrooms that I've observed in, they kind of just like every morning sat down and like talked to each other. They practiced their names so everybody knows their names. And then they did different activities depending on the day, but just checking on how they're feeling, what they did over the weekend, stuff like that.
Perfect. Yeah. And how about feeling check-in, Ashley? Do you want to talk a little bit about that?
Yeah, so I really like when I see teachers or school counselors do little check-ins with their students. Maybe if the school does zones of regulation, students will share like, I'm in the blue zone today, or others will say they're in the green zone. But there's lots of creative ways I've seen people do check-ins, like even using weather, right? Like a sun is, like someone's doing really well, all the way through on the other end, a storm cloud. And kids can kind of point or indicate where they are that morning. So just again, a check-in.
Awesome. So taking that example that Ashley gave, and just you can pop them here in the chat, what SEL component you think that's activating? And just a reminder, there's self-awareness, self-management, social awareness, relationship skills, and responsible decision-making. Does that question make sense? Maybe. So in naming, right, naming the feelings, what SEL? Yeah, self-awareness, absolutely. Social awareness. What about self-awareness? Absolutely. What about self-management? Do you think it promotes self-management? Yeah, because if you're in the red, right, if you're typing and sharing with everyone that I am sort of in the red emotionally, then that's a little flag for yourself to kind of maybe monitor that a little bit, right? And it can also help the teacher with helping you with self-management as a student, right? If you as a teacher know that a student has had a really bad kind of weekend, or they're in a really bad spot that morning, that might make you more aware, so you can kind of help them with some of that self-management as well. Okay, perfect. Okay, so let's go to the middle school case study. And Ashley, could I ask you to read this one?
Yes, I'll go ahead and do that. I'll still share my. Okay. So at Springville Secondary, which is a 7 through 12 school, the 7th and 8th graders have a class dedicated to learning about emotions, personal responsibility, stress management, communication, etc. So this class period begins with a shout out. At this time, the students verbally share the feelings they are currently experiencing. This helps the teacher in knowing where each student is at and allows the students to gauge how their friends are. Next, the students participate in a few minutes of mindfulness or meditation led by the teacher. This helps the students relax, refocus, and be present during the class.
Okay, awesome. So let me see in the chat here, what are the SEL components you think this is activating? So again, self-awareness, self-management, social awareness, relationship skills, or responsible decision-making. Absolutely, self-awareness. Yeah, relationship skills, social awareness. Yeah. Who said relationship skills? Marissa, would you mind saying a little bit about how you think relationship skills might be activated?
Yeah, I'm guessing like with the part about seeing how their friends are feeling for the day, that's gonna like make their relationship stronger if they know like if they need to pick me up or something like that.
Absolutely. It kind of facilitates connections, right? Because if I know how you're feeling, that might help me connect with you in a more appropriate or in a more immediate way than if I didn't know sort of where you were at. How about Maddie for self-management? How do you think this pertains to self-management?
I would say self-management, just because like during the meditation, you're given the chance to like check in with yourself and just kind of reset your mind.
Absolutely, absolutely. And I'm going to go to responsible decision making, and give you that definition, because I wonder if this also may be clicking into that as well. So responsible decision making is promoting your own health, avoiding risky behaviors, contribute to the good of one's classroom. Do you think that might be highlighting some of those things as well? I mean, mindfulness and meditation, right? Promoting your own health. That has a connection there as well. And then also doing that as a group, doing that as an activity, right? To get everybody to be at a good spot. So that also has some of that collectivistic elements that are important for responsible decision making. Okay, so let's go to the next case study. Okay. So at the high school level, teachers can acknowledge positive behavior as a way of promoting a positive classroom environment and encouraging responsible learning practices. Behavior contracts at the beginning of each semester, Dr. Gale has his students sign an integrity pledge. It states that students will complete their homework independently, with teachers' help when needed, to have the potential of earning full points on assignments. If students do not maintain integrity, they will lose points on that assignment and in the course. Another one is group contingencies. As a class, we will generate 5 questions that are examples of synthesis. If we can meet this goal by 2:15, I will allow you to sit where you would like for the last 20 minutes of the class period. Another one is token economies. John, you are very respectful when your peers came in and asked for space. You've earned 10 bonus points towards your behavior goal. Well done. So I'd like you to pick one. Maybe you can say behavior contract or group contingency or token economies, and then maybe identify what are some of the SEL skills that those things may be activating. Absolutely, Savannah, for token economies, good. What about for group contingencies? What do you think is being activated there? Do you see any responsible decision making there, right? Being activated for your own good and also the good of the classroom, right? Come on, let's get together. Let's work on this. Relationship skills as well. It requires collaboration. I love the idea of behavior contracts for high schoolers because it really sets some of the makes the expectations clear, but it also provides them with supports who they can enlist to help meet those expectations. And the reward point is also it creates a positive climate for the classroom. So let's go next to our discussion slide. Okay, so you can choose one of those questions to respond to, and I'd like this to be a verbal discussion if possible. So what is something that you learned about SEL today that was new for you? Why do you think it's important to incorporate it in the classroom and the school? What do you need to learn next in order to feel more competent in SEL? And then who can help you deepen your knowledge? Who would like to go?
I guess for me, something new that I learned was how different SEL looks for like what age group you're teaching. I guess I didn't realize how you would use it in like a high school setting, but your examples really helped.
Okay, great. Thank you, Kate. What else did you learn about SEL today that maybe was new to you?
I learned how prominent it. Oh,
no, you go ahead.
I learned how prominent it was because I didn't know that there was actually programs in almost all 50 states.
Yeah, Maddie, it is kind of the way that we're going to be doing education, I think, for the foreseeable future. So it is something that has become such common vocabulary out there in the field. Savannah, what were you going to say?
I didn't know about like the circle that you showed with the 5 different components of social emotional learning, and then how it can span out into like classrooms, schools, and communities. I didn't really know about that, and I thought it was interesting how like the case studies showed the different ways, like really simple things like token economies can promote like a multiple of those different things.
Mm-hmm. Perfect. Awesome. Okay. Why do you think, well, let me ask you this. What do you need to learn next in order to feel more competent in SEL? What are you going
Oh, sorry.
Go ahead, Autumn.
Okay, for me, I think just maybe like application of SEL in terms of kind of like how we saw with that video with the zone. I think that's super interesting. So maybe just like resources or I don't know, like guidelines or something like that. So we know how to implement programs like that, as well as just like in the classroom, but just other things like that, super interesting. And you mentioned Castle as well. So just, I would just say resources and ideas probably.
Perfect, perfect. Resources and ideas. And then who can help you deepen your knowledge? Who can you enlist in your, in your little folder of people that can help you deepen this knowledge as you are continuing your educational journey?
I would say both our professors and like whatever teachers we happen to like observe or shadow, like if they have any tips or tricks into implementing it.
Absolutely, Marissa. I'm glad that you talked both about the content piece, right, while you're here and taking classes, and also the practice piece when you're placed out there and you have a teacher supervisor. From Ashley, this is a good plug-in, Ashley, checking out the Iowa Center for School Mental Health and the Baker Teacher Leader SCBH webinar series. And there's going to be a lot of these webinars that are going to be pushed out because this is really a big focus that we have here in the college, and you are the perfect stage of development to maybe get some of the benefits of some of these additional resources. Let's go to the next wrap-up slide, Ashley. I do want to remind you that we know SEL is most effective when it's a part of your daily classroom life. So including little things that you do on a daily basis, that is the most effective way. We know when it's incorporated into everyday instruction, it's really helpful in fostering some of that positive school climate and relationships, and model constructive behaviors too. And I guess when I talk about modeling, you are going to be the biggest models in those classrooms. For many students, you might be the most trustful adult that they have access to in their lives. And remember that you also need SEL competencies, right? So it's a lot easier when you yourself have masters and model some of your competencies. So do the work that you feel is necessary now that you have the chance, you're still in your educational journeys, to kind of really improve some of your own skills around social and emotional learning. If I could pick one of the skills that I need to improve upon, it would be decision making. I do need some help with responsible decision making sometimes. So I would just like you to think about those five SEL competencies and put them in the chat. What is an area you think you need to focus more for your own personal development? So self-awareness, self-management, social awareness, relationship skills, or responsible decision making. Let me see those come in really quick before we close it out here. Perfect. Self-awareness, self-management, lots of those coming through. Responsible decision making. Maybe you and I can start a group of how we become more responsible decision makers. Okay, self-awareness. Okay, perfect. So I think it's important to also identify that you are human beings too, right? And you are a work in progress. So self-management, self-awareness, responsible decision-making, relationship skills, those are all things that are going to benefit not just you, but also your students. And for our last slide here, Ashley, with 2 more minutes to go, sort of to Autumn's question, here's some SEL resources that I think would be helpful for you. CASEL, of course, the Iowa City Community School District also has really focused on SEL. PBIS, I don't know if you've heard of PBIS. I'm sure it's a common knowledge in some of your courses, but how you support and respond to behaviors. And then social and emotional learning in elementary school is a really good website as well. Okay, so I think that's it for the specific content today. So Ashley, maybe stop sharing the screen. And let me see, we have about 1 minute here to go. Any questions about SEL or any of the content that we talked about that I can help you with today? Okay, so no questions. Thank you, everyone. Ashley saying, don't forget to log this workshop. Thank you for your time today, and I wish you a wonderful Monday. Bye-bye.
Okay, let's see. Do you have a question?
Alexandria, do you have a question? Maybe not.
Maybe not. Okay.
Okay. All right, Ashley, thank you. We're right on time.
Yeah, that was great. Thank you so much.
Okay, bye-bye. See you later.
Bye.